Yeah, so as Eric said, I'm founder and CTO of a company called ShareThrough. This talk is a little bit different than the other talks you probably heard today because it's focused on a later stage of a startup, but I think it's something that more and more startups are going to encounter now that it's becoming easier and easier for competitors to jump into your brand new idea that is getting some traction. And so we're at this pivot point in our company now where we're facing this dilemma. So my first slide is a pure vanity metric slide that you should all boo. The main purpose of me putting these up there is to just show how we've, in the past few years, we've grown, and we've gone from 3 employees to now we're 70 employees. We have an office in New York, an office in Chicago. We're headquartered here in San Francisco, and we're obviously a very different company than we were back 4 years ago. Because of that, the way we build product, the way we deploy software, and the way we just operate as a business has evolved and has changed. And so because of that, we're now in this interesting position of trying to innovate. Before I get into some of the things that we did to solve that challenge, I want to quickly just review what we do as a business since we are a B2B business. Not many of you probably have heard of ShareThrough. So what we do, we work with brands and Fortune 500 companies and the advertising agencies that represent them. We take their viral videos, what they believe to be at least viral, but typically these videos are they're entertaining content, they're things people want to watch, and usually they're videos that people want to share. They've created these videos, they come to us to get an audience. What we do is we take these videos, we place them across our network of publishers across the internet in a very deeply integrated placements across the internet, what we've been kind of talking about as native advertising. And we run across these sites, are very deeply integrated. And then at the end of the campaign, we present analytics to the advertisers that show how well their campaign has performed, how many people have watched it, how much reach do they get. And then on the flip side, to our publishers that we work with and our partners, we show them how much money they've made and how well they're monetizing with us. So the position we're in now is, we've done well as a company and we can continue to grow based on where we are, but we're at this point now where we realize that in order for us to continue to grow, continue to succeed, we need to take it up to the next level. And this concept of innovate or die, you hear it all the time, and it's funny to be a startup where this concept is continuing to ring true. And the fact is customer development and the lean startup never stops. You just keep on having to go and having to iterate. The one distinction I want to make in terms of innovation here is a distinction that Clay Christensen makes in The Innovator's Dilemma. And it's the distinction between a disruptive innovation and a sustaining innovation. The type of innovation that I think, as a startup and that as a startup trying to re-kick things off again is disruptive. I think once you build your first disruptive innovation, then you kind of have these series of sustaining things that kind of continue that give you this lead over and over. But the disruptive things is what gets you that first product market fit and what gets you that hockey stick and that vanity metric that everyone loves to see. So when we kind of started reaching this point in the company and we realized that we needed to start doing these disruptive innovations, we sat back and we looked at things. We're like, this should be easy to do. I mean, we're a startup. It should be easy for us to create some cool new things. We'll throw it into our backlog, and every now and then we'll work on these cool new ideas, and we'll eventually build something disruptive. Something will come out of it. What we found was that was completely false. And I have these next series of slides are all kind of tongue-in-cheek slides to kind of speak to why that's not the case. So, if you're actually running your organization well and in a very lean way, in a non-wasteful way, you won't have any existing resources available for you to just allocate at this brand new crazy idea that potentially you and your co-founder have. There's no one on the team that's willing to do it. So you have a resource allocation issue there. The next thing is the number of internal customers, the number of people inside the company that actually know what it is you're working on and know what it is that you're building is zero. So the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Everyone in the company is speaking about this existing business that is doing well. And if you're trying to build new product, there's no one there kind of pushing for it. And then there's the certainty of revenue. And here it's just these two types of product features are just apples and oranges. The features that are there to support the existing business are all, you can pretty much quantify them pretty well in terms of just what the ROI will be in terms of what that product feature will do. And then if you're comparing it to a disruptive idea or a feature that might help you build towards some strategic advantage, you can't compare the two. What we found is balancing success and disruptive innovation is especially hard in a startup. And because of that, you have to do things very deliberately and I think very carefully in the way you would. I think it differs in you have your own sets of challenges when you're an existing enterprise corporation. But in a startup, I think it's especially interesting, difficult to do it. So here's some of the things we did. I broke it up into 3 different steps. So the first step is creating the right environment. And I think it's really important to clear out the right space and the right mindset to set up this team for success. So the first thing we did was identifying existing resources within the organization. And this is after we've done the brutal prioritization and said we're not working on this, this, and this. But finding the right resources within your organization brings up a really deep analysis of the types of employees you have and of the employees who are resources that would be more leaning toward building new product and going to be more interested in building iterations of learning versus building scale, robustness, and uptime. And understanding those types of people and like what kind of makes them excited, separating that out, and then kind of giving them these projects is actually really empowering. The other thing, and we were fortunate enough to do this, and part of this is because we were overflowing out of our existing office, but we actually physically moved this team of engineers into another space. And a lot of times, skunk work type initiatives do this thing, and there's huge value doing. And even in our 4-year-old startup, there's a lot of cultural things and just ways things are done in terms of the day-to-day that are ingrained in the minds of everyone. So isolating this team out just kind of gave them the blank check to say, hey, go do whatever you want to do that you think is best. And they sat differently, they arranged the desks differently. And doing so, I think, is a very powerful indication and kind of empowering them to say, hey, it's your turn to step up and innovate. The other thing is, this is managing expectations. As we've grown, there's a lot more stakeholders involved. There's a lot more people who kind of want to know what's going on and why we're investing in this. And I think the key is not to say, these guys are going to revolutionize the business in 1 quarter. And doing so, you're setting up this team for failure. On the flip side, you also don't want to say, we don't know what they're going to do. They're just going to go out there and explore and figure out a whole bunch of stuff. You want to give them a time frame, but you don't want to also give them too much time. So the next step was kind of setting up the goals and boundaries. And these are obviously important, so this team has an understanding of where they want to go and where they want to start. But the boundary thing, I think, is useful because as with any startup and any type of initial idea, you need to have some set of boundaries so you know what you're operating against and what you're trying to push against. So for us to create this initial boundary, what we did was we did internal customer development, which was only for this initial stage. But we used this as a way to quickly understand the market landscape, the potential business problems that are out there, things that we just generally thought would be interesting and worthwhile to solve. And we use these to develop our initial hypotheses. And these are all obviously the initial hypotheses that we then will prove or disprove and build upon from there. The next thing this is very typical, very standard lean startup, but build an MVP that solves a simple business problem. I think as you become a larger organization, the problems get more complex, and you want to be able to solve all those crazy corner cases all at once. The key here is, again, just to solve something really simple, get some traction, and just build on top of it. And this last point is, I think, something that I always like about that I use when I'm building product, which is build product with great design in it and not just a hack. You kind of want to at least have, when you're talking to your users, you're talking to existing customers, you want to be able to show something where you can get some positive feedback other than just saying, oh, that looks kind of hacky and I don't know if I would use it. Because you're not really getting good feedback at that point. You're getting feedback on your design, not on the actual product itself. So along the way, you want to make sure that you're setting your milestones and giving the right types of progress checks. The one thing that we did that was interesting here, we separated out the way feedback and information was flowing back into the company in terms of how things were going. We wanted to speed up the communication time and the kind of the learning time. And doing so meant that we were kind of leaving some parts of the company in the dark because they weren't being informed all the time what was happening, and things were just going straight up to myself and my co-founder. But it was all for the sake of learning and iterating quickly. And the idea is, at some point, you have to take more effort than to go back and redistribute that information, but it helps you iterate fast. The other thing we did, and this was a way for us to reinforce the concepts of getting out the building. And I think one of the things that I've noticed is as you start to grow and as you start to scale, you don't get out of the building as much because they're just operational concerns you need to take care of. And one of the things that I did to make sure we were constantly getting out there was just I set up release markers in our backlog that just corresponded with customer meetings. And this kind of forced us to get out, and it helped us rally around customers and features we were building for them. And the other thing, this kind of is along the lines of the boundaries as well, but not giving too long of a leash and too short of a leash. You want to give the team time to fail, and you also want to give them time to quickly to iterate through their problem and figure something out. And what we did was we decided, let's give them a quarter. That's enough time to iterate a couple times, and it's not too short of a time that we're demanding too much out of this team. So here are the quick learnings that I got from trying and using this system to kickstart some innovation. Innovation is hard. Even though we were successful in doing it once, it's hard doing it again, and it's actually even harder doing it again. And one of the key things I realized is there are some old habits you end up having. We were taking customer assumptions and customer feedback and just copying and pasting that into this new product, into this new world. And you actually have to go back out and rebuild your customer archetypes because one, this product is potentially tapping into a new set of users. The other thing is probably the assumptions you have from 4 years ago are very different than the assumptions that exist now. And also, as a player now in the industry, it's very different types of analysis that you're doing. The other thing is understanding that you have to iterate differently here, that the engineering process, and we've essentially allowed the engineering process to be a little bit looser on the innovation side of the house because we recognize that they're building software for a different goal. In the successful business line, what we're doing is, that software is all about uptime, scale, robustness, and having downtime is a terrible thing if that happened. We would lose dollars with that. But on the innovation side, if it goes down, no one's using it, who cares? So we're not necessarily looking for scale. There's a certain level of scale we need, obviously, but that's not what we're aiming for. We're aiming for learning, and you end up having to engineer and build very differently. And this kind of makes you realize how different and how much the company has evolved from those early days, but you have to kind of bring that back. The other thing that I realized that we were missing was what do you do when you've finished this experiment or finished this idea? You need to have a transition plan of, all right, this little tiger team went out, tried out an idea, started building some stuff, succeed or fail, what happens to this team? What happens to the idea? Do you cut it off? Do you plan to reinvest? And if you don't have a clear transition plan in place, it kind of leaves everyone at the end kind of in limbo and not sure what's going to happen next. So you have to think that through. And my last point is, just be ready for disappointment and be ready to pivot. It's, again, you're kind of back in the early stages of building a company again and building an idea, and you're going to have to pivot and you're going to have to kind of fail and learn from your failure. All right, thanks.